A Roman walks into a bar and says, "I want a martinus." The confused bartender asks, "You mean a martini?" The Roman replies, "If I need a second one I will tell you." 4 Rings of Afterlife. So, a man wakes up in a dingy slum with no memory of how he got there. He wanders around aimlessly before he finds even one person who will talk to him. Some ratty beggar on the street turns out to be nice enough to explain where he is. "You're in the afterlife," he tells the man, "but you must have been a real shithead when you were alive, because this is the 4th ring, and only the worst people come here." All of a sudden, a siren goes off. One of those air raid things. The man is terrified, but the beggar gets up calmly and leads him to a big, dilapidated warehouse where thousands of other similarly unkempt souls are gathering. When the man asks why they're all here, the beggar points to a line of folding tables against the wall. Each table has some moldy bread, cups of dingy water, and some bowls of broth so thin they could have just run out of cups. Only then does the man realize how hungry he is. A guard in heavy body armor blows a whistle and all the people arrange themselves into 3 lines. The beggar is helpful enough to explain them for the man. That one's the bread line, that's the broth line, and that's the water line. All the food here is free, but if you want to get out of this maggot hole, you've got to work, because the gate guards into the 3rd ring ask $500 to get through. Eva heard the food is better there, so the man gets his food. It's abominable, and right then and there, he vows to make $500 and get into the 3rd ring. Unfortunately for him, very few people need work in the afterlife, especially when all of them are saving up to emigrate. Even still, after 10 years of hard work, eating the moldy bread and indistinguishable soup and water, he finally saves up enough money. The guards let him through and he finds himself in the 3rd ring. It's nothing too fancy. If anything, it's a bit below average for a real city, but to his eyes it is paradise. All the guards look much friendlier, and the houses and buildings, while not spacious or lavish, are at least up to code. And to his surprise, he runs right into a familiar former beggar as he crosses the street. "What are the odds?" they both ask, and they get to conversing. The beggar, it turns out, only managed to make it in himself a few months back. Their conversation is interrupted, however, by what sounds like a school bell. When the man seems confused, the beggar leads him to what looks like a giant gymnasium. Here, people are gathering once again, and the man begins to understand. On a line of folding tables against one wall are stacks of hot dogs, big bowls of salad, and solo cups full of fresh lemonade. A cop shouts for everyone's attention and directs them all to stand in 3 lines. The beggar smiles at the man's wonder and points to each line in turn. "That's the hot dog line, that's the salad line, and that's the lemonade line." The man gets in each line in turn and gets himself his lunch. While he's eating, basking in joy at not being stuck with old bread and water, the beggar encourages him. The best part is, halfway through the year, they switch from hot dogs, salad, and lemonade to chicken, chili, and hot chocolate. You can never get tired of it. Sadly, this proved not to be true. After only a few days, the man did again get tired of the same meal every day. But he knew firsthand that he could change his lot. So one day he went up to the wall of the 2nd circle. This time the guards were asking for $10,000. Well, the man didn't like it, but he figured he had his whole afterlife ahead of him now that he was out of the 4th circle, and he could certainly take some time to save up. After 10 years of hard work, it wasn't too difficult for him to keep up the work ethic, and only 20 years later, he went back to the guards of the 2nd ring with the money in hand. He went through the gate and found himself in a glittering, clean city full of glass and steel. And would not you know it, but there, standing across the street was the same beggar, only now he was wearing a well-fitted suit. The man greeted the beggar as an old friend and they started talking again. Once again, their conversation was interrupted, only this time it was by beautiful church bells. "Come," the beggar told him, "I'll take you to the evening meal." So the man followed and they entered a glamorous ballroom filled with beautiful attendees. Even the cops here looked good, dressed in suits and sunglasses like bodyguards. And sure enough, piled onto platters on huge mahogany tables against the far wall were plates of steak, bowls of the most delicious seafood soups, and glasses of champagne. One of the bodyguards cleared his throat loudly and politely requested that the attendees line up. 3 lines were formed and the beggar pointed each line out in turn. "That's the steak line, that's the soup line, and that's the champagne line," and then he added, "and apparently here, They changed the meals 4 times a year. The man rejoiced, ate, and was happy, and for once felt that nothing was lacking. 4 changes a year was enough for him. But one day, out of curiosity, he went up to the bodyguards that guarded the gate into the first and final ring of the afterlife and found they were asking for $1 million to pass. Well, the man was a bit disturbed by this. After all, the second ring seemed perfect to him. What is it, he thought, that could possibly be more wonderful than what I have here? That question haunted him for weeks until he came to a conclusion. He was used to working hard and he had all of eternity to save up. So he wanted, just once, to see what he could possibly be missing in the first ring. 50 years later, he returned to the guards with $1 million. When he stepped into the first ring, he fell to his knees. The architecture was glorious and inhuman, and the bodyguard had turned into shining angels. To his surprise, someone helped him up off the street, and when he looked, he realized he recognized who it was. It was the beggar he met in the 4th ring, adorned in a golden robe and glowing. And when he looked down at himself, he realized he looked much the same. The beggar laughed jovially. I got here only 3 years ago myself, but somehow I knew you would be right here behind me. Eva come back to this gate every day waiting for you to make it in. Suddenly, the air was filled with the sound of angelic choirs, and the beggar led the man off to a gigantic palace made of crystal and cloud. The room was filled with radiant citizens of the first circle, and angels prepared everything. Sure enough, there was a line of massive altars against one wall, spilling over with glistening golden dragon meat, a pudding refined from clouds and dew and silk, and an ice-cold tub of ambrosia and nectar ladled out individually into blindingly beautiful crystalline chalices. An angel fluttered from the ceiling and bowed silently to the assembled mass, who bowed respectfully back and then broke themselves into their lines on their own. Smiling at the tradition, the beggar pointed to the first line. That's the line for the dragon meat, he said before turning to the next line, and that's the line for angel dust's dew. Then he paused, confused. What is it? The man asked his old friend. The beggar replied, there appears to be no punchline. The blind sales clerk. A woman goes into Cabela's to buy a rod and a reel for her grandson's birthday. She doesn't know which one to get, so she just grabs one and goes over to the counter. The clerk was standing behind the counter wearing dark glasses. She says to him, excuse me, sir, can you tell me anything about this rod and reel? He says, ma'am, I'm completely blind, but if you'll drop it on the counter, I can tell you everything from the sound it makes. She doesn't believe him but drops it on the counter anyway. He says, that's a 6-foot Shakespeare graphite rod with a Zebco 404 reel and 10 pounds test line. It's a good all-around combination, and it's on sale this week for only $20. She says, it's amazing that you can tell all that just by the sound of it dropping on the counter. I'll take it. As she opens her purse, her credit card drops on the floor. Oh, that sounds like a MasterCard, he says. She bends down to pick it up and accidentally farts. At first she is really embarrassed, but then realizes there is no way the blind clerk could tell it was her who tooted. Being blind, he wouldn't know that she was the only person around. The man rings up the sale and says, that'll be $34.50 please. The woman is totally confused by this and asks, didn't you tell me the rod and reel were on sale for $20? How did you get $34.50? He replies, yes, ma'am. The rod and reel is $20, but the duck call is $11, and the catfish bait is $3.50. She paid it and left without saying a word. One day, a group of friars decides to open a flower shop as a way to raise money for their belfry. Because they are men of God and pillars of the community, the locals start to buy all of their flowers from them. This draws the anger of another local florist, who sees the holy men as having an unfair advantage due to their association with the church. After making countless attempts to put them out of business, he decides to enlist the help of a local thug named Hugh to chase them off. Hugh successfully scares the friars into closing their shop and fleeing town, once again proving that only Hugh can prevent florist friars. Walking through Chinatown, a backpacker saw a Chinese laundry with the sign, Sigurd Christiansen's Laundry. Sigurd Christiansen? How the hell does that name fit in here? He wondered. So he decided to check it out. He entered to see an elderly Chinese man behind the counter. How did this Chinese laundry get a name like Sigurd Christiansen's Laundry? The backpacker asked. The elderly Chinese replied, my name I'm owner. Really? How did you ever get a name like Sigurd Christiansen? Many years ago when arrived at this country, was standing line at documentation center. Man in front was big Norwegian. Lady asked him, "What's your name?" He said, "Sigurd Christiansen." Then lady asked me, "What's your name?" I said, "Simting." Please smash the like button, and subscribe to my channel.